Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. In this video I thought it might be interesting to explore just a little bit of music theory as it relates to guitar. Now, apologies for the rudimentary drawings. This is all done by hand. I am a musician, not a painter or a sculptor or an architect. But hopefully this will be good enough to get the point across. Now, the first thing I should mention is probably the most important scale to learn is going to be your diatonic scale. Now, what is diatonic, you would say? It can be described as a 7-note scale, and it just happens to be the scale that all other scales can be based on. Now, I'm sure people will fight me on that. However, if you follow my logic, I'm pretty sure you'll come to see my point here. So, if we're looking at just the major diatonic scale, we've got whole, whole, half, and then whole, 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 half. Now, what the heck is a whole and what is a half, you might say? Well, we'll start this in reverse order. A half is a shorthand for half step. And basically what this represents is following along a string, you're going from one fret directly to the next fret. That's a half step distance. So just to illustrate, from here to here, that's a half step. Here to here, that's a half step. And so on and so forth. Now, when we got a W, that represents a whole step. Now, going back to the fretboard here, we'll just get rid of these. A whole step is every other fret, or every 2 frets. So that would be considered a whole step. This would be considered a whole step. This would be considered a whole step. All right, so once again, half is from one fret directly to the next, and whole is every other fret. Now going back to our diatonic scale pattern, which is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Say that 9 times fast. When we write that out, we get a major scale pattern. So just for fun, let's start on the open string. So we got whole, whole, half, and then whole, 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 and half. I'll write that in for you. Okay, so this is the major scale. And quite frankly, I find it a lot easier to understand on guitar than on piano. And allow me to illustrate my point. So on piano, we've got the white keys and the black keys. And basically, from one key to the next, regardless of if it's black or white, it's going to be a half step. And for whatever reason, they decided to go with this pattern. And these white keys happen to line up with the major scale diatonic pattern for the key of C. So I'm sure you've heard, like you got your C goes the other way. Got your C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you're back to C, which is an octave, which is another way of saying the same thing but higher. Sorry, I can't draw either. But if we follow this pattern for the key of C, you can see you got a whole because we got this black key in between. So, wah, wah, then whole again, bwah, bwah, a half, bwah, a whole, bwah, bwah, a whole, bwah, bwah, a whole, bwah, bwah, and a half. So, this is great if all you're doing is playing in the key of C. However, the moment you change up your starting note, the pattern goes everywhere, on the black keys, on the white keys. Every scale has to be its own thing that you learn and memorize. Whereas on guitar, you can take this pattern and you can literally move it to any location, to any string, and it is going to be the major scale of whatever note you start with. So right now it's on the open E string. So this is E major. If you want to do an A major, you can move it down to the A string. Alternatively, if you wanted to play in, say, G major, you just take this whole pattern and budge it up to the 3rd fret where our G note is. And then your whole, half, whole, half starts from that 3rd fret. And this will always be true on guitar. So the moment you learn one pattern on guitar, all you have to do is move it around, and you're in whatever scale is your starting note. A lot easier to memorize than getting into this mess. Also, once you start learning all the notes on the strings, you can figure out those patterns, and then you can literally move them up or down. And it's the same principle, whatever note you're starting on, even though you're going like across the neck this way, whatever note you're starting on, that's the key that you're going to be in. So what I'd really start encouraging you to do is to actually start looking at these as patterns over time, rather than even remembering the specific notes. Now, it does come in handy knowing where all your notes are, and that's something you can totally work towards, but it's more important to get these patterns memorized. So, for instance, if we take our major scale diatonic pattern, which is just this thing right here, and we decide to do a 3-note per string pattern on that, let's pick a starting location. Let's say G here, because that's the guitarist's favorite key. I know people will fight me on that, and that's okay. So we're going to do a whole, another whole, and then between here and here is B to C, so that's a half. Then C to D, that's a whole. And D to E, that's a whole. And then E to F sharp, that's a whole. If we went to F, that would be a half, so that wouldn't work. So then we're back to G. Then we just keep following this pattern until we get all the way across the neck. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. So this is an example of a 3-note per string pattern. And the beauty about this is once you learn it, so you just literally just play this, note by note going up the strings. you can move this pattern anywhere you want to, and you will be in whatever key your starting note is. So right now we're in G. You could easily take this pattern and move it up to the 5th fret. And now it's going to be the key of A major. But you only had to memorize this pattern. You see what I'm saying? You can shift this thing around as needed for whatever situation you're in and literally just, transfer it. So when you learn one pattern or one scale, in this case the major scale, you literally learn it for all the keys because all you have to do is move it up or down. To further illustrate how important it is to just learn this pattern, if you're finding like all these notes confusing, replace them with dots, okay? That ain't gonna work. Need to get a different color. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna tell you to not even think about the note and only think about the pattern. If you can do the note too, that's amazing. But in order to avoid confusion and just provide focus on what's important here, we'll just say that these notes don't exist. We're just following the dots, okay? Now, it's still important to know where you're starting. So if you find a song that's in the key of G, you have to know where your G note is so you have a place to start, right? So you definitely want to know where you're starting from, but just know that this pattern represents the major scale of wherever you're starting. So to kind of bring this all together, we're looking at this whole half pattern. Now, what does this mean in the broader context? Well, okay, so we know that a half step is literally directly from one note or one tone to the next. So a whole is every other tone. And we just happen to come up with 7 notes. Why is that? Well, we can also find the answer on the guitar neck here. So if you count out like the number of notes before you get to the octave, so in case anyone doesn't know, basically your 12th fret, that's going to be your octave for the open string. So let me remove this 12 because it's going to get confusing. So if you, start from anywhere, basically you're going to find you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tones. And then it starts again on an octave. So like this would be the 13th fret. So basically this 12th fret is like the open string, but 1 octave up. That's why we got the dots there to kind of mark where the octave is. Now what this means is we have a total of 12 tones we're working with, and then it all starts over higher or lower depending on the direction you're going. And when we're talking about these diatonic scale patterns here, basically we're just arranging these or this pattern in such a way that we get 7 notes that sound good together. And this is the way it pretty much is for most Western music. It's true for rock, metal, rockabilly, acoustic, pretty much anything you can think of, although some Eastern music, they do some weird things with like quarter tones and stuff. There's no way we're getting into that. because that's approaching very strange territory in music and is not really something we need to get into unless we're in like a master class level of theory. But in summary, there are a total of 12 tones, and basically we arrange 7 notes within those 12 tones to get something that sounds good. And that's how we discovered our major scale. And from there, most other scales can be born. Like once you learn this, all the other scales are variations of this, or are related. Hopefully you found that helpful. I know it gets kind of confusing at times, but that's why we're here to help each other out. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. I'm sure there will be a lot of backlash on this one, but that's okay. That's why we're here, right? We're all here to learn from each other. So once again, hope you found it helpful and have a good one.